Welcome to The Lion's Den, a podcast from Red Lion Controls. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host today, Tyler Kern. Thanks so much for joining us here once again. As always, here on the podcast, I'm joined by Barry Turner, Technical Business Development Manager at Red Lion Controls. Barry, welcome back for another episode of the show. How you doing, man?
Doing all right. Thanks. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. I'm excited to talk to you today. Barry, give us an idea, just a little introduction, a teaser, if you will, of what we're covering and what listeners can expect.
So my background is in IT before coming to the OT side of the equation. And so I've got roughly 15 years of experience in networking, IT, and I've got roughly about 10 or a little over that in the OT space. And so where we are today is there's a convergence between those two different components where the OT is aligning itself more with the IT side for security and other things. And we're going to talk about what that convergence looks like and what the limiting factors seem to be today.
I like that. Well, let's dive in because there are at times misalignments between IT and OT, right? So what's the biggest misalignment between IT and OT that can sometimes prohibit that convergence like what you're talking about? And how can that issue be mitigated?
Yeah, so I hinted on that just a second ago. It's security. It's around the priority around security, really. And so the IT and OT just simply have in the past or traditionally misaligned priorities. The OT is responsible for making the application work, making it efficient as possible, whereas the IT department is responsible for maximum security. And so many times making it work and maximum security are directly conflicting with one another. And so the priorities tend to be misaligned. And so what's going to be required for the full alignment is for the OT department to implement some of the techniques and strategies that the IT department has been finding great success with. Defense in depth is one of those, for example. So defense in depth is a technique or strategy that adds multiple layers of protection that protects a network or an application from attack. And so many times these protection or these layers of protection would come in the forms of VLANs, firewalls, access control, things like that would protect at different layers overall or giving the network itself an overall increase in security.
So let's talk a little bit more in depth about defense in depth. So tell me a little bit more about the specific technical benefits that a defense in depth strategy offers and how it can really make a difference when it comes to implementing new levels of enterprise and automation integration.
So increasing the networking application security by implementing a defense in depth strategy will help align both the IT and OT and create a more robust application in general. A great way to get started is to build zones and conduits using VLAN routers and ideally monitored access control. So in terms of hardware, we're talking about routers, layer 2 Ethernet and layer 3 Ethernet switches, using the Ethernet switches to create VLANs to make smaller networks or zones, then using routers and firewalls to build a path in and out of those zones. It is also important to be able to have access control and some type of monitoring and alerting. So many times access control can be accomplished by using access control lists, which will allow access based on IP address or MAC address of the network device. And lastly, the network needs to be able to log and alert when unusual activity is detected. And many times syslog is used here to do that kind of thing. It's a technology that the IT department has already been using, and it's supported in many of Red Lion's products and our industrial products like our Flex Edge controller and our NT24K Ethernet switch. Adding a layer that can detect and alert when bad things happen will ensure a controls engineer has as much time as possible to take action and hopefully mitigate costly downtime.
Excellent stuff. I think that's a great answer. And so as a result, given all the challenges of IT and OT convergence, from a technology perspective, how do OT engineers prioritize security while also not deprioritizing uptime, right? Without deprioritizing that uptime that is so important, right?
Right. Yeah, and it really is. I mean, that's usually the barrier to increasing security is we don't want to jeopardize the uptime of the application. And so getting this very critical piece of information or this very critical piece right is all about education and communication. The IT department has been in the cybersecurity battle for a few more years than the OT. It's a good idea to learn from that experience and build on it. And so the IT department typically doesn't have unmanaged switches in their network, for example. Unmanaged switches just don't have the features necessary to implement a defense in-depth strategy. So likewise, controls engineers would be better served if they replace their unmanaged switches in their networks today with fully managed switches like those made by Red Lion Controls to increase the security by implementing that defense in-depth strategy using those features that we talk about, the VLANs, the access control, other things like that that are built into a managed switch that an unmanaged switch simply does not offer. In addition to that, having managed switches will enable a controls engineer to make sure that his network aligns with the IT department, ensuring that they're able to work together and build a future state of our industrial networks that 5G and Web3 will require.
So Barry, as we wrap up this episode and tie a bow on it, any final thoughts, anything that you want people to walk away with if you had to tie a bow on this episode and kind of summarize our conversation? Help us wrap it up today just with any final thoughts.
So the thing that I would like to add to this is that the convergence of IT and OT is happening, and it's happening very quickly. And that it's going to be important that the controls engineer is armed with the tools necessary to make his application as secure as possible. Managed switches have features, unmanaged switches don't. And we've gotten by for a long time on unmanaged switches that just provide connectivity. But now security is a bigger concern for us and a higher priority for us. And so now it's time to take a look at these managed switches.
Excellent stuff. Barry Turner. Barry, where can people go to find more information about Red Lion and learn more about the kind of expertise that you're discussing and providing?
Yeah, check us out on redlion.net. If you'd like to reach out to me directly, it's barry.turner@redlion.net. The information will be in the show notes for the podcast, and I'd like to hear from you.
Absolutely. There you go. Redlion.net is the website. Make sure to reach out if you have questions. If you want to get in touch with Barry, make sure to do that. Barry Turner, Technical Business Development Manager at Red Lion Controls. Barry, thanks for joining us for another episode of the show, breaking all this down for us.
Enjoy it. Thank you.
Absolutely. And everyone, make sure to subscribe to the podcast for upcoming episodes. You don't want to miss any of the thought leadership coming from Barry and the other experts at Red Lion Controls. So stay tuned. We'll be back soon with more episodes of the show. But for this one, for Barry Turner, I'm Tyler Kern. Talk to you again soon.